Hey there, BookTube. Noah, everyone who reads it must converse. What a night we got ahead.
Yes.
We got Yasmin at To the Lit House. Link is
Hi.
in the description box. We got Ami from Ami 1649. Links in the description box. What a couple of awesome Borges readers. And we are locked and loaded to go on one of
Yes.
the longest Borges stories that there are, and one of the most mind blowing.
Yes.
It feels like he threw the whole bag of tricks in this one. Am I right? Like it's just thought
Oh yeah.
experiment. It's
Yes.
ridiculous. Do y'all want to say something before we just get into it? Because I feel like we just need to get ripping and roaring.
Yeah, I mean, it
Um.
starts so strong. I'll say that. I'll say that
Mhm.
opening scene, which I guess we're about to discuss, is like such a gripping start to the story, and yeah, very memorable.
Yeah. And I would just say that I know I always say Borges is better when you read him, which I think is true for many, if not all, authors. Um, this is just so much better when you reread it, and I don't think you can even understand all of it on a first read. So if you didn't think that you got it or didn't think that you liked it, I would highly just suggest just rereading it because the first time that I read it, I was just completely confused,
Right.
more so than any other story.
Borges rewards a reread and
Oh
rewards
yeah.
multiple rereads. It's just so rich. And this opening scene, what you're talking about, is beautiful. The first line: I owe the discovery of Uqbar to the conjunction of a mirror and an encyclopedia.
Yeah,
Some Borges,
Great.
love it, because
Yeah.
the mirror plays a big as a very heavy symbol in a lot of Borges stuff, and he is so deft at exploring a symbol from so many different angles. We could talk about
Mm-hmm.
the mirror in Borges' work just as a symbol, um, and also an encyclopedia, right?
right.
Yeah.
So what he's referring to there is um, a kind of a rarefied encyclopedia, I guess a Spanish version of an Encyclopedia Britannica. Is that right?
Right. Totally. Yeah.
Right. So
I,
it's
I
like
think I had one of those growing up.
nice. So he
Hmm.
has
Nice.
this kind of Spanish version of Encyclopedia Britannica, and him Borges is the I. He's the him. So he and Cesares are sharing an evening together, talking lit. Maybe they're having some drinks, and round about midnight, the mirror is looking a little bit, uh,
Spooky,
suspect and
creepy.
spooky. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So,
And also, we get this amazing line, right? And because the mirror is like sort of like haunting them a little bit, uh, Bioy remembered a saying of one of the heresiarchs of Uqbar: "Mirrors in copulation are abominable, for they multiply the number of mankind."
right.
It's one of my
That's
favorite
that's
Borges
what he
lines. Yeah.
does, right? Caesaris says that little line, and then they
And they're
okay,
trying to
go ahead.
track down like where he got it from, right? And can
Right,
I just say this is such an ordinary scene that he's talking about? Like Bioy Casares is a real person, was a real writer who was really good friends with Borges, and they would always talk about their writing and what they were going to write next. And so in this little scene that he's talking about, they're just talking, about a potential story that they could write, and then suddenly Bioy Casares mentions this, and they start trying to track it down. So
right. They're
it all starts
exploring little,
with this very ordinary moment.
right,
And they're
like
chasing
it's
it. Yeah.
yeah, exploring fictions, and then they go, or he says this line, and he goes, "Well, where's that from?" Borges says, "Well, where's that from?" And he says, "Oh, it's from the article on Uqbar in this encyclopedia." Well, he has a copy of the encyclopedia, and it's not in there.
Right.
So
Hmm.
he discredits this. He says, "Well, maybe my friend was coming up with a cool story to kind of support his phrasing there." And then they're in this kind of place, and I saw that he's playing with facts, like a concreteness of fact, as opposed to like abstract, like misremembering. He's Borges is playing with that there, that like is this, he thinks his friend is misremembering something, or he's attributing it to something else. But even a day later, or pretty soon after, maybe it's not defined very quickly, the friend calls him up, and he has a copy of the encyclopedia, this same encyclopedia, that does have the article on Uqbar. And then and they it is the same encyclopedia with the same spines, the same covers, the same everything, but there's 4 extra pages to his friend's encyclopedia, and those 4 pages are exploring this country called Uqbar. It is vague, it is ambiguous, the kinds of things that are said about the descriptions of Uqbar and all that kind of thing. And then his friend is walking through, past a used bookstore, and sees the spines of the same kind of encyclopedia, goes in to see if Uqbar is in that one, and it's not as well. So his friend is in possession of a unique version of a very popular encyclopedia, or something like that.
Oh, I was gonna say, which is crazy if you think about it, because it's like they are the fact that they were the ones to find this. Like, maybe if somebody had been in possession of this encyclopedia, of this very unique copy, they might have not even looked at Uqbar, but it was Cáceres, someone who's very curious and loves knowledge and just like seeks these very obscure articles, and he remembered it. And then he talked to Borges, who's the same type of person, and then they try to track it down. So if this copy had been in the hands of anybody else, then it would have just been lost, because they would not have looked at it or remembered it.
Yeah, and there's something like so unsettling about all this, because in this world that we're thrust into, like the encyclopedia is like the source of truth. Like, encyclopedia is how we know about the world. It's like, it's our grasp on reality. And to have these alternate versions that are like inconsistent, suddenly like reality starts to feel unstable. What is real? Like, what is the truth? Like, what is the world we live in?
Yeah, exactly. So they get into this kind of like where they're detectives. They're figuring out this. Why do you have this kind of encyclopedia that has an article on a country that none of the other of the same editions of this encyclopedia have? And this country is vague and ambiguous, and what is actually going on here? So
then they go to the National Library.
Well, in the encyclopedia is Uqbar's Epics and Legends. And the epics and legends never refer to reality, but they refer to imaginary regions. So Uqbar's literary tradition, which is myths and legends and things like that, they only refer to imaginary realms. And here it says, there was one notable characteristic. It is remarked that the literature of Uqbar was fantastic in character, and that its epics and legends never referred to reality, but to 2 different imaginary regions, Melenas and Tlon. And then the bibliography listed 4 volumes. And then we get into beautiful stuff that Borges does. This is how he makes something feel so real when he's making it up completely, because he has all this supplemental material, literary criticism. He'll bring in a bibliography. He'll talk about just all kinds of. He obviously he was a librarian. Obviously he was very schooled as to how to approach literary works and how you give them credence, and he does that so succinctly in his short stories. It's beautiful, amazing. But so we have a reference in that encyclopedia to Tlon, and that is the legend or literary traditions of that country, right?
Yep.
Y'all got anything to add to that?
And then we get like world building.
Right.
Now we start to dive into the texture of this unknown region and its mythologies.
Right. So that's part one, and then there's a part two to the thing. Before we go to part two, real quick though, I do want to add that there is in that bibliography, there's a German theologian who at the beginning of the 17th century describes the imaginary community of Rosicrucians, which is a Rosicrucians, which is a fraternal order, secret society. And so did that in a fictional work. The community, which was later founded by others in imitation of the one he had preconceived. So we have a reference to one of the guys in that bibliography is attributed to fictionally coming up with a secret society with all kinds of initiation rites and a purpose that later gets actually brought into existence physically by a group of people that follow those kinds of guidelines that are laid out in that, but then also expound on them and make a system out of it. So the Rosicrucians, right? And saying that the Rosicrucians, the inception of that order, may be completely imaginary fiction.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so Borges is playing with all this stuff here.
And you already get a sense at this point that like the question that is at stake here is like this question of what is reality? Like what like how do you distinguish between imagination, shared hallucination, and is there a difference between a shared hallucination of reality versus physical, something external to that, like an ultimate reality or something? And like these are sort of, this is like what's at stake as we like try to make sense of these questions here.
Right. And definitely when you talk about the encyclopedia as like a compendium of knowledge, this is what, before the internet and when Borges wrote this is what you went to when you wanted to know a fact that you didn't know anything about. And if this thing is undermined, then where does that leave you?
Exactly. Yeah, nobody ever questions it. And if something were to change in the encyclopedia, but everybody got the exact same copy and everybody was told the exact same change, then it would become the new truth in that way.
So they've found something that is supremely interesting. They can't let it rest, and then they're off to the races. So the second part starts off with Borges, the I, talking about my father's friend, and this friend is described as impersonal and removed. They have a relationship where they don't talk much. They'll play chess and beat each other without saying a word. They have this kind of relationship where they don't really share their personal or inner lives, and they like it like that. This is the friendship, the kind of friendship that it is. But this guy is Herbert Ash. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is it
Herbert Ash, yeah.
Herbert Ash. Okay, and Herbert Ash gets into a conversation with him one day, and it's about like some different type of mathematics, a base 12 rather than a base 10. And they're talking about that, and Borges is just like, oh, thank God that this conversation's over. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. But this guy is a friend of the family, and he knows him, and he dies unexpectedly of a brain aneurysm. Is that right? Is it because it said something different in the text? But I assume that what it is a brain aneurysm.
Yeah, in my text it says that it's an aneurysm.
Okay.
I get to use it that word,
months later, he finds this kind of volume that was Herbert Ash. I guess kind of maybe he died at the bar when he had this book at the bar. So
So I
This
believe it was a book that he received, this package that he received days before he died that was unopened,
so
right?
he was, it was addressed to him though, and
Right,
Borges
and it was,
narrated.
and he didn't open it, and then he died. So Borges was the one to open it and find this book.
Nice. So
Yeah.
it's an octavo volume. So this is a if you know about how printings went back in the day, like octavo volumes are where you have, I mean, it might be an easy way, a cheap way to print something because you have one big sheet that has 8 pages on it. When you fold it a certain way, it makes the book. So you have, each sheet does 8 pages. Print it, print it, print it, print it, print it, and then you just have to cut on the folds. You know what I mean? Nowadays we have deckled edges, but back in the day, why those deckled edges happened was because books were printed like this, and you had to cut them in order for them to be,
Nice.
books.
Yeah.
And so it's an octavo volume.
Yeah.
And I thought this was really, really fun. And so I began to leaf through it and felt a sudden curious lightheadedness, which I will not go into, since this is the story not of my particular emotions, but of Uqbar and Tlon and Orbis Tertius. In the Islamic world, there is but one night, called the Night of Nights, on which secret gates of the sky open wide, and the water in the water jugs tastes sweeter. If those gates were to open, I will not feel what I felt that afternoon. This book was written in English and had 1,001 pages. On the yellow leather spine, and again on the title page, we read the words of First Encyclopedia of Tlon. So he says, this is not a story about my emotions, so I'm not going to go into that, and then goes into that.
Yeah.
Right into
yeah, he resigns to that and realizes that telling the truth of how he found this and what this is inevitably tied to his emotions and how he felt when he found it.
So the
But
emotions are at play now as the mystery deepens. And I think that what Borges is showing to that is that there is a human drive for mystery. There's a human drive to figure something like this out. Would you agree?
I think it's also just classic Borges, because so much of what he does is conveying emotions and conveying human drama through the lens of like academic writing, and through sort of like a mathematical kind of didactic professorial voice, and so he's like, that's what the voice we hear here is like. I'm not going to go into anything subjective, my emotions. This is a story of like a academic investigation, but of course it's both,
Right. And of course, like you say, like when it comes down to it, the drive is coming up from within the person. They love this stuff. And so this kind of mystery, this kind of academic mystery, is like something that is right in the wheelhouse. And what lover of literature and humanity itself doesn't love a very deep mystery about hidden knowledge? And that's what this is.
Exactly.
It's so good. All right. So then he goes straight into what this book is volume 11 of the Encyclopedia of Tlon. It is one of 40 volumes. So he has a fragment of this huge encyclopedia of Tlon. And it's just such an awe-inspiring idea. But he has some substance to go on. And this, even volume 11, is exhaustive.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, yeah, 1,001 pages.
So the second part, like what we've gotten up to now, turns into complete thought experiment. where Borges goes completely off the rails with exploring what this encyclopedia, this fragment of an encyclopedia brings to the table as far as what these people of Tlon believe, think, how they handle themselves, how they speak, what their world is all about. And it is pretty mind-blowing. And so now we've already went to a whole nother level without really, if you just read the text, you don't really notice. But we're no longer on a country on on the earth. We're on a completely different planet that was said to be fabricated by legend and myth by the people of this country. And now we're going to explore those people, a totally different planet, their philosophy, psychology, science, all that, right?
Yeah, which is all psychology and very rooted in idealism.
It's ridiculous. All right. So one thing I do want to point out before we just get into all that is the thing of, again, Borges calls it out. We conjecture that this quote unquote brave new world was the work of a secret society of astronomers, biologists, engineers, metaphysicians, poets, chemists, mathematicians, moralists, painters, geometricians, and all under the supervision of an unknown genius. There are plenty of individuals who have mastered these various disciplines without having any faculty for invention, far less for submitting that inventiveness to a strict systematic plan. This plan, the encyclopedia, is so vast that each individual contribution to it is infinitesimal.
Yeah.
So there's another, as far as what we have in front of us, as far as this literary criticism of exploring the Encyclopedia of Tlon, they're also keeping the question in front of us of who created this and why. Like what would it take to create something like this, right?
Yeah.
All right. So we want to get into the different various thought experiments that are at play in this, because at first it's all about language, right? Borges works us into it slowly, and thank God for it. Thank you, Borges. So the northern hemisphere of Tlon is a
I think it starts with the southern hemisphere.
The southern hemisphere. Okay. So the southern hemisphere, one, there's no nouns on Tlon.
Exactly.
There's no person, place, or things. Everything is subjective. Everything is subjective.
So they don't think of objects in space. They think of sequence of events that are independent from each other, and they pay more attention to time rather than space.
And their experiences of coming into contact with something or being somewhere, it's all about their experience of it. That's how they frame their
subjective
language.
experience, exactly. Yeah. And so things are never remain the same. Things are always changing, and that's what they base this whole thing on.
So in the southern hemisphere, it's framed as everything is verbiage.
Yeah.
Something
so nouns
does.
are replaced by verbs.
Yeah.
And
something
the examples
does
are great.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, nouns are replaced by verbs, and we are actually shown an example of something in the language of Tlon, which I don't think I could pronounce if I tried. But then the example in English is upward behind the on-streaming it mooned. So it doesn't talk about the moon, the noun, but rather it mooned as a verb. So things are defined by their actions, essentially. And we're given context, right? So upward and behind, but we're not really told this thing did something. It just, this thing occurred. So again, it suggests that things are constantly changing and things are dependent upon one's subjective view and their actions,
Right.
which is very interesting.
Like the only language is the language of experience, like phenomenology and
Right.
subjective.
Yeah. And then in the Northern Hemisphere, they use adjectives instead of verbs to describe nouns. So they'll talk about something that's dark and circular instead of just talking about the object itself, which is also super interesting. And I sort of interpreted this as, if I read all of this correctly, is that he's sort of also using this to describe feelings and ways of experiencing the world. So looking at a color. So I think one of the examples is that pinkish color that you see when you close your eyes, or the sun and the water against your chest when you're swimming, and all of these things. And something that he brings up is that the fact that they don't really believe or use nouns just make nouns infinite, because they'll start describing things as, pink and round and or dark and whatever it is. And the more adjectives that you add, the more variations of that thing you have, because if you were to remove one of those adjectives and replace it with something else, you have a completely different thing, right? So the more descriptors that you use, the more variations and the more things there are, which I thought was really interesting.
And at the heart of this is like a denial of like physical reality, of like anything external to experience.
Right.
And that gets us back to like that image of the mirror in the beginning, that's like multiplying the numbers of men. This idea that everything is just an illusion, like everything is just a vain reflection. It's empty. There's no substance to what we experience.
Right. He actually goes to so far to say that space and time in Tlon are subjective. Space and time itself, and that no thing or idea is objective. There's just no framing for that in the ways that it goes with them. Okay, so for them, the world is not a concurrence of objects in space, but a heterogeneous series of independent acts. It is serial and temporal, but not spatial. There are no nouns in the hypothetical, whatever that word is, Ursprache of Tlon, which is the source of living language and dialects. They are impersonal verbs qualified by monosyllabic suffixes or prefixes, which have the force of adverbs. So, what a beautiful, amazing thought experiment that is. You can go all through the Southern Hemisphere, how they, everything is doing something. That's all that it is. The moon moons and the sun suns, and they both shine with some kind of, and the different amplification and the experience of that by experience only, because it's all about subjective experience. It's all about just that. And then the adjectives is even more muddy, where, like you said, you can just go into an infinity real quick of objects, because the second you change any adjective describing the same thing, some people's experiences are different, you have kind of a different object sitting there than what another person might experience. So, but both would be exactly right. All subjectivity is true. And then we get to then we get to, I guess it's a paradox. I saw it as a paradox.
Right. Even before that, they also like deny causality, right? Like if, this amazing line of like smoke on the horizon, a cloud of smoke on the horizon, and then the countryside on fire. and then the half-extinguished cigarette that produced the scorched earth is considered an example of the association of ideas. You know, there's they don't think in these causal terms. They think in these associative terms, and then I think we get to the paradox
that's right. Exactly right. And yeah, I should, thank you for sure for bringing that up. It's that kind of thing is essential. These kind of things that, it's so alien to us. You get a sense that it really is
right. Yeah.
world.
But since we are seeing it from, like, we're looking at this being described, we're seeing it from the perspective of the people that are living there almost, and thinking, how alien is this world to them? And just trying to understand and grasp these concepts, which we're going to get into now in a bit, but like, it's just crazy.
And even just, they might, if they were thinking about, if somebody gave an encyclopedia of soul to Tlon, they'd be like, why would you, why are they doing this? This doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
Exactly. Which makes you think, like, what does it mean to make sense? Like, where are we getting that? And just, it's crazy how perception shapes language, but then also language shapes perception. And all of
exactly.
So there are famous poems made up of one enormous word, a word in which the truth forms a poetic object, the creation of the writer. The fact that no one believes nouns refer to an actual reality means that, paradoxically enough, there is no limit to the numbers of them. That is just a beautiful line. One sentence, Borges can just send you floating. Send you going out there.
Yeah, I really like how he talks about writing and how, by describing things this way, and that's something I forgot to say before, the things, I guess, become so ephemeral because they depend on so many things for them to stay the exact thing you're describing. So I like how I can't quote from it, but how he just says, a writer will just use this string of words to describe something, but then that's sort of gone after he or she uses it, because that was just used for a purpose. But then immediately after that, it might change, So I don't know. I just really like that whole section.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's awesome. And just to maybe finish it off here, I don't know if we're going to get to the coin paradox right off the rip, but if y'all got any thoughts about, they consider, the Tlonians, they consider metaphysics a branch of fantastic literature. They know that a system is nothing more than the subordination of all the aspects of the universe to some one of them. Even the phrase, all of the aspects, can be rejected, since it presupposes the impossible inclusion of the present moment and of past moments. Even so, the plural past moments is inadmissible, since it supposes another impossible operation.
You know what this reminds me of? That line in Death and the Compass, when the detective says, well, yeah, this is likely the thing that happened, but it's not interesting. So that's what this reminds me of. And they just don't look for the truth in physics, so they just have fun with it, and they just see it as just one big thought experiment, and just the thing that amazes them the most. Yeah,
they don't even believe there's such a thing as physics.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. Well,
I mean, it is a branch of literature, right? So it's of something
metaphysics.
fantastical.
Metaphysics, yes.
Well, It says that all sciences are subject to psychology. In the Tlon world, because it's all about subjectivity of the perceiver. So it's all about the person, the mind, or maybe not person, but the being, whatever being that is experiencing this. And yeah, I mean, we're talking about a branch of literature within literature, because this is the legends and myth of the Uqbar country. It's ridiculous.
Yes.
It reminds me of what is Schenectady, New York. with where it's just these Russian nesting dolls that never end. You know what I mean? You just keep going through, and there's no end to it. Borges is so perfect at this. So yeah. So then there's another and maybe the last branch of their thinking to get to, which is the coin paradox, which is their mathematics, which is framed at some point in the nature of geometry. So we'll get to that. But I don't know if I should just read out the whole coin paradox. Anybody that's really read this has read the whole thing, but it's basically that there's 9 coins and there's 3 individuals, and one individual loses 9 coins one day, and the next day the second individual finds 4 and brings it to him. The next day another individual or the first individual, not very clear, finds some more of the coins on his on in his hallway or something, and it's an exploration of these individuals and the coins as objects. But in the Tlon ideas, these kind of things don't have any selfhood of themselves, like a noun, like
they don't persist over time.
Right.
They're always just new coins. Every instant is a new coin.
Right.
Yeah, somebody brings, and it talks about the pencil, where somebody lost a pencil and then somebody finds a pencil and they bring, but they keep the pencil that they find, and then the other person finds a different pencil, but it's
exactly right.
And it's like, it's an amazing kind of thing, and I just kind of saw it as an exploration of whether equality and identity equal or cancel each other out, or if the identity of these things are their actual substance. And it was like a philosophical question for this alien world or something.
Yeah.
I also sort of read it as like a parody of our physics, or in our metaphysics specifically. Like he does that a lot, I think, in a lot of his stories, where like there's in real philosophy, like one of the most important thought experiments of all time are called these like Gettier, or I'm not sure if it's Gettier or Gettier, how it's pronounced, Gettier problems, where a guy came up with a problem that overturned all of like epistemology and philosophy. He said, what happens if I put 3 coins in my pocket, and now I think I have 3 coins in my pocket, and then they fall out of my pocket, but I don't know. And then miraculously someone drops 3 more coins into my pocket. And now do I know that I have 3 coins in my pocket? And this was like a huge like upheaval in mathematics or philosophy, like read like Getty examples online. But like Borges like making fun of this, like it's absurd. To a Tlonian, this is like as ridiculous as our reading about this thought experiment. It's like exactly parallel.
Yeah. Exactly the opposite perception. Yeah.
I think you're exactly right. I think you're right onto it, because when it comes down to it, Borges was a master of the thought experiment, and when he saw a thought experiment that's frivolous, he knew what he was looking at, and loves to call that kind of thing out. I'm reminded of a short story in The Maker. You remember that, Yasmin? It's like it's got this absurd like Greek title. And it's the exploration of whether God exists by looking at a flock of birds.
Oh yeah,
that's what it is, and it's just like complete absurdity. And he's calling and that's what he's doing. What you're pointing to right there, poking fun at a philosophical exploration that's completely frivolous, but by being satirizing it, parroting it, for sure.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
Sorry. No,
I'm sorry. Your turn.
Oh, okay. No, that I will talk about equality and identity, and a question is raised, like, isn't it ridiculous to think that if 9 different men experience pain in 9
Yes.
different nights, like whether is that what you were gonna say?
Yes. Yes.
Whether it's the same pain, and then there's a footnote saying like nowadays, it's believed in Tlon that sort of that pain, for example, is the only thing that really matters, and that the things can be identified with. So he gives the experience of somebody who reads a line of a Shakespeare play is William Shakespeare in that moment. So all that really matters is that you mimic somebody's actions for you to become that person in that moment. And I just thought that was a really interesting thing.
It is interesting. It's ridiculously interesting.
But there's something to it. It's not just the action, it's the mental state. Like if you know, if a person is in a particular mental state, Borges has he explores this in a lot of stories. He has I forget what it's called, but it's a story where he describes like the king dreaming he's a butterfly. You know, if someone has two people share a mental state, then in Borges's conception of the universe and the Tlonian conception, which is very similar to Borges, right? Because I think Tlon is very much like Borges lives on Tlon, you know. So
right.
If you share a mental state, then you're identical. You know, I think of like someone who's in a state of meditation and someone else in a state of meditation. They share the same consciousness. You know, there's no distinction there.
Because how you experience the world is your world, and if you're experiencing the world as someone else in a particular moment, then you are that person in that moment. Yeah, it's
and this line of like all men who speak a line of Shakespeare are William Shakespeare. It harkens back to Pierre Menard, the author of the Quixote.
Yeah,
which you guys made a video about, with this idea of trying to become Cervantes, Miguel de Cervantes, and write the Don Quixote. So I think so much of what we see in this section about Tlon are the seeds of so many Borges stories, because these are like the ideas that he's like constantly wrestling with.
Right. You're right. This is the first story in fictions. This was an early story. And he wasn't afraid to throw everything out there, because he knew it could be endlessly explored, that he could endlessly explore this and throw us into this in so many different ways. It's so beautiful. So the last thing about this kind of just ridiculous exploration that we could go on forever, I wanted to touch on was that the mathematics of Tlon after that paradox and this kind of thing we talked about is framed as a geometry at a second. And it says this system rejects the principle of parallelism and states that as a man moves about, he alters the forms which surround him. An arithmetrical system is based on the idea of indefinite numbers. It emphasizes the importance of the concepts greater and lesser, which are mathematics symbolized as the symbols, triangular symbols. It states that an operation of counting modifies quantities and changes them from indefinites to definites. So, my bookshelf is different how I'm looking at it right now, a different thing how I'm looking at it right now than if I was standing across the room over there and looking at it, because I'm changing the shape of it, and everything is so subjective in the Tlon way of thinking that even if you are looking at something from a different frame of reference, you're dealing with almost a different object. Because there's no objectification. There's no object there. It's only your experience of said object. Right? Oh, yeah. It's ridiculous. It goes way into a concept of Huronier.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how to pronounce that. This is where my brain started melting earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what I mean? I'm trying to kind of stay with it and conceptualize all this stuff in order to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And there's the idea of the mind itself being of such importance that belief or hope is what it says. Hope for something brings it into existence, actually. And so the process is a recurrent one. a Huron of the 12th degree begins to deteriorate in quality from the 11th. Stranger and more perfect than any Huron is sometimes the which is like an essence maybe or something like that, which is a thing produced by suggestion, an object brought into being by hope. The great gold mass that I mentioned previously is a distinguished example. So there's the story of excavations going into a certain area to try to bring up ancient relics, things like that, and everything's doesn't bear any fruit until there is that gold mass that's brought up by the subject, the person's hopefulness,
right?
You know.
So the yeah.
And
yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. No, what I was going to say is that here, I think that Borges takes things to another level that we have been seeing, because we saw before how perception, influences language, and then language perception. So they couldn't really grasp the concept of materialism because of the way they were language to work. And now it's like that language, which affects perception, affects also their actual reality, which is a really scary thought, or not that scary, depending on how you think about it.
Yeah. Right. And I think Tlon is a Hornier, right? It's right. Anything that distorts reality because of like this collective hallucination, this collective hope, this collective creative project. So a bunch of academics, they sat down and they wrote this encyclopedia, and this encyclopedia starts to impinge and encroach on our reality. The fictional world starts to manifest itself in the real world. Right. Exactly like the Hornier that Borges is describing here.
And you say collective hallucination, collective mental construction. Hallucination implies that it stays in the imagination or in the internal world, right? But what we're talking about is something being built out of that in the physical world, or even, there might be steps between the mental to the physical world. Gaining raw materials for the construction of before it is built, but the inception is in the mental, and the fruit of it is in the physical. So collective mental construction. So I love it. It's awesome, huh? Are y'all ready to leave part 2 behind and go into Postscript 1947?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Postscript 1947 is the final part of this story, and I just want to say that 4 lines down in the second paragraph, it says, the letter that he's gotten, the letter that our main character, who is Borges, right? The letter cleared up entirely the mystery of Tlon. So we're cool, right? I mean, we can totally be cool that all this is about to be cleared right up.
Right.
So this text and what it is, it turns into a blistering fast run through human history timeline, where we see how Tlon and Uqbar, we've already exhausted Uqbar, so now Tlon and this kind of thing is going to be inserted into human culture, So we have first the 17th century, a secret society in, does it say? I mean, it said where it is, but I'm not really.
Tennessee, I think, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
I don't know where it is. So, it's Lucerne or London.
Ah, okay.
So it's either or in the text,
Europe.
but we're about to totally just clear it all up. But, and then right in like the next couple of lines, there's a either or statement. You know what I mean? It's Borges is awesome. So in the 17th century, there is a secret society that plans to invent a country, Uqbar, and insert that fictional country into the mainstream, into human knowledge, and try to make it real, right? Try to do what they can do. This project is too large for one generation or even two generations of people to do. So a kind of hierarchy is established where you know, these different specialists in their fields are going to pick a disciple to go ahead and further this through the ages, through time. And a hierarchy through generations is established pretty quick off. And one of those is George Buckley, who is one of the ones who's part of the bibliography from earlier. So,
isn't it Ezra Buckley?
Is it Ezra Buckley there?
I no.
That's the the one in?
That's the other one. That's the one that came after.
Okay, yeah. George Buckley is the 17th century, maybe grandfather of Ezra Buckley. But we see this kind of generational thing work out here very quickly. And in 1824, there is the invention of the planet Tlon.
Right. And that is Ezra Buckley. And he's in the United States.
In Memphis, Tennessee. Good old Memphis, Tennessee.
And so the project sort of moves to America, right? And he says, why would we invent this country or this region if we can invent a whole planet? And that's how the idea of the planet comes by. And then he says, let's keep this project secret. So a lot of things that are sort of tied to the ego almost, I feel like. So trying to create the biggest thing possible and trying to keep the secret. And also he says God can't be involved in this whole project. And there's a really funny line saying, Buckley didn't believe in God, but he wanted to prove to this non-existent God that he could create a planet, or he could create this
or that
thing,
humanity could do it.
Right. Yeah, that man could do it. But
Right.
So yeah.
And that theme runs throughout all of Borges' writing, the idea that the act of creative creation that the author engages in is parallel to the divine creation. And it's like all nested, you know? It's like the created creates, which creates.
Right. And each justifies the one before, as long as they continue to create.
Yeah.
You have to go for it. You have to do it. So then we go to 1914. In 1914, which is almost 100 years after the idea of creating the country, Ezra Buckley that you just talked about, Yasmin, has come up. Almost 100 years. In 1914, the society forwarded to its collaborators 300 in number. 300 over the face of the planet. That's how many people are in this secret society. They forwarded the final volume of the first encyclopedia of Tlon. The edition was a secret. The 40 volumes which comprised it, the work was vaster than any previously undertaken by men, was to be the basis for another work. It was not the final. Okay, a 40-volume encyclopedia of this planet is not to be the final goal. This is a basis for another work. A more detailed, and this time written not in English, but in one of the languages of Tlon. Right? I mean, what? Why is Borges?
Yeah.
there's a parallel to that in the world of computer science, because like in the evolution of every language over time, there's like a big, exciting, mind-blowing milestone that gets like written up about how they're finally writing the compiler for this language in that language. You know, like the software that's responsible for reading and interpreting it is going to be written in the language that it's like an infinite like cycle. You know, so it's the same thing here. You know, it's like the Tlon Encyclopedia, which defines Tlon, is written in the language of Tlon. You know.
You know, it's wild that you bring that up, and I thank you for that, Ami. That's why you're here. Jesus, it's awesome. Because it's called out earlier in this work that this work could not be the work of some solo genius Leibniz, right? Mm-hmm. The guy who created
calculus,
the what is it? The zeros and ones, the
binary? I don't
know.
The
binary. Right? The binary system. He didn't create it for computers. He created it as his own genius explorations, but then it becomes the basis for our computer language, centuries later. And just like what Borges is talking about here has analogs with computer language and the ways that these things work. And Borges himself had no idea what computers were all about.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's completely ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have a couple of these things that harken back to the first part of this story, where somebody seemingly by chance or by accident comes across, or our guy Borges, the eye of this story, by chance or by accident comes across something to do with Tlon in the physical world. In 1942, a compass with the Tlon language is opened by a princess, and he watches her do it. He can see it. She doesn't care. She doesn't know what it is. She doesn't even know what that language is or whatever, but he knows, and he saw it. So it's a completely subjective thing, and all that kind of stuff, it wouldn't mean anything unless there was this person there subjectively experiencing these things and compiling what we're reading. You know what I mean? It's pretty mind-blowing. And then just months later, there is the accident. A sudden rising of the Turacarimbo, maybe, river compelled us to test and suffer patiently the rudimentary hospitality of a general store. The grocer set up creaking cots for us in a large room cluttered with barrels and wineskins. We went to bed, but we were kept from sleeping until dawn by the drunkenness of an invisible neighbor. So just some guy, drunk as hell, raving in the hallways or something. As might be supposed, we attributed this as insistent uproar to the fiery rum of the proprietor. At dawn, the man may lay dead in the corridor. The coarseness of his voice had deceived us. He was a young boy. In his delirium, he had spilled a few coins and a shining metal cone of the diameter of a die from his heavy gaucho belt. A serving lad tried to pick up this cone in vain. It was scarcely possible for a man to lift it. I held it in my hand for some minutes. I remember that it was intolerably heavy, and after putting it down, its oppression remained. They acquire this cone, this kind of thing, and then it says at the end, those small and extremely heavy cones made of a metal which is not of this world are images of divinity in certain religions in Tlon. So this society is deftly inserting random things to confirm it, knowing that somewhere, somehow, it's going to be found. It's something that is not like anything else. So it's going to be kept or found or something like that, and acknowledged as something unique. And they're just inserting these things to support their imaginary world.
Yeah.
I read it a little differently.
Go ahead.
I could be wrong, but I read it as the mythology of Tlon is sort of taking on a life of its own. It's like you sort of created a monster.
I read it both ways.
That starts to take on its own existence, its own reality outside of the minds of the people who spawned it.
Right. So the same way that this weird object, what's it called? Like you are, like you hope for something and then that thing becomes true, or you find it in reality. Yeah. I also read it like that. I read it both ways. I wasn't sure. I was sort of rereading the section to see whether Borges like hinted at something more than the other thing, but it could either be like completely man-made, men are inserting these objects, or it could actually be true.
Well, he says, it is reasonable to suppose, in keeping with the plan of projecting a world which will not be too incompatible with the real world, the dissemination of objects from Tlon throughout various countries would complement the plan. So he says, the explicitly the kind of thing that I said, that these people are inserting this to work through their plan. But there is no doubt that he's also pointing to what you're talking about as well, Ami, because with the hope and the subject himself and his hope bringing into being the thing that he's hoping for and searching for.
Right. And also, I think if you look at how the story ends, I think it implies, again, this sort of what I'm saying. I hear what you're saying, Noah, for sure. It's definitely supported. But it seems like the other side is also supported by the end of the story, where he says contact with Tlon, the habit of Tlon, has disintegrated this world.
Yeah.
And like skipping a little bit, he says like French and English and mere Spanish will disappear from the earth. The world will be Tlon. That makes very little difference to me. But his point is like there's this process which has been started and it can't be stopped.
Right.
It's overtaking our history.
Yeah, and the reason I'm also inclined to think that it is this thing like taking over is that Borges seems a little resistant to it. So he was all for it in the first, and I think that it's really interesting how this whole story is constructed, in that you start with a very ordinary moment, and then it gets into this detective story, and then you talk about the fantastical, which is like the whole this whole article that we read, but then it also goes to him finding these clues in the world. So I guess also sort of this detective thing, and then back to reality, but how reality is changed. So I just think that's really cool. But back to the topic, I feel like he sort of doesn't like these intrusions into his worlds. When he picks up the cone, he says he felt disgust and fear. I don't know how it's translated, but essentially that. And then towards the end, the part that Ami just read, that it's disintegrating the world. So all these negatively connotated things indicating that he's not really happy with this change. So if he were really to be hoping for it, then so
he's not embracing it. Our narrator Borges is not embracing it. He's calling it out as usurping the the place
of. But you said that bit. Oh, sorry. Just really quickly, you said that bit where he said that people were inserting these objects in the world, right? But he's himself biased, and that is his own view, maybe because he doesn't want to really believe that the world is becoming Tlon and that it's actually happening, So I don't think there's any way to know what's really going on. Sorry, Ami, what were you going to say?
No, I'm agreeing, and I think it ends on such a dark note. Again, it's like it's considered very ominous. Towards the end, he compares it. Look how he describes it. He says, 10 years ago, any symmetry, any system with an appearance of order, for example, dialectical materialism, anti-Semitism, Nazism, could spellbind and hypnotize mankind. How could the world not fall under the sway of Tlon? It's like this. It's like the power of like distorting reality, and and these like distortions like affecting the real world, playing out in
Right.
the real world.
Right.
Right.
Right. Like we see a system that has some sort of order and we are immediately drawn towards it because we crave order. And I like what he says about a labyrinth, like Tlon might be a labyrinth and might be confusing, but it's created by people and it's designed to be deciphered by people, and like the universe, which is like this library of Babel, which we can't really decipher. So we are gonna be drawn to it.
So Borges is supremely perceptive and super deeply perceptive. So I'll continue what Ami was quoting right there, because I want to work to bore this out a little bit. Why not fall under the spell of Tlon and submit to the minutiae and vast evidence of an ordered planet? Submit and fall under the spell have negative connotations, right? Except the next line, unless to reply that reality too is ordered. We live in an ordered reality right now. We don't just crave order. This is ordered. It took order to make us. It took order to create human beings. Our consciousness is born from some kind of order, some vast order that we can't understand. We don't crave order. We crave a meaning for order, because order is the name of the game. Order is happening. There is order. It may be so, but in accordance with divine law, and I translate in human laws. The order is in accordance with divine law, and divine law meaning in human laws, which we will never completely perceive. Tlon may be a labyrinth, but it is a labyrinth plotted by men, and a labyrinth destined to be deciphered by men.
Right. So I guess that's also what I was getting at.
So it's a trick, and it can be deciphered. It is so supremely it's so supremely like you're so interested in it, and it has this mystery and it draws you. That's what this whole thing is about, is this person being drawn into this mystery. And then the whole thing is he's saying, well, but you can figure out Tlon because it is something that is constructed by men. But men will take that, mankind will take that over the real reality of our world, because the real reality of our world is an order and is all these things, but it's so vast and incomprehensible that you won't figure it out. So people will go for that easier thing, you know what I mean? And they know that this society has put that out there because they know that, and they're doing that purposefully. So why?
Exactly. And we get so many of Borges' stories where people get really close to the truth, or they figure out something about like the divine design, but then they can't live their day to day, like actually knowing that and internalizing that. They need some sort of order in their human world in order that they can make sense of it.
And the thing is there is order. I mean, I love how he calls it out here explicitly, that there is order. What people need is an order that they can comprehend, that they can understand. That's what they need. They don't that there is an order is implicit in the fact that I can see and I can eat and my body functions and the trees grow. There's an order to reality, but it's so incomprehensible, and people don't want this mystery. They want something that they can wrap their heads around and say, okay, cool, now I can go ahead and go do something that I don't want to do, or whatever. You know what I mean? Go live their life. Anything on? I want to just bring up the question of now, why would society, why would men, why would mankind, why would people do this kind of thing? What is it that is the real thing that, like, a big thing, the big thing that Borges is getting at with this kind of society, secret society, that is basically usurping knowledge and inserting their own knowledge. Why? Why would they do that? What is the goal? What is the end game? What are they doing? Any ideas?
I thought it was like challenging God.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
It is explicitly in the text that one Ezra Buckley is doing it to challenge a non-existent God,
Right.
because he doesn't believe in God, but he's saying, well, we can create a world, but unless you create actual physical beings that have their own will, creating an imaginary world, no matter how many people believe in it, you didn't create an actual, ecosystem. You didn't
Right.
create.
So, but what's happening here towards the end is that they're just borrowing the people from the earth and like making, I guess, making people believe in the system.
Nice.
So, like you said, they understand how the human mind works essentially. So they know that something that looks orderly, that they can understand and decipher, they will like. So I guess there's also a component of control there and just wanting to control people that way. And why
Right.
not do this if people are just going to follow systems anyway? Why not create just our own planet with our own rules and have people believe that? And then, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you that there's some, want to challenge God like that and feel like God like that.
Right. Well, so that's an ego thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
an internal ego thing of like, well, I am, if there's no God, there's no God. Say there's no God. Well, then what is there? Well, there's me. The me is the ego. And if that is the only thing that there is, then that thing has to be elevated. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
has to be embraced completely. If that kind of thing is what's happening, then it's an ego experiment, an ego trip, and it will be brought down when it fails. That's when it'll be brought down. It won't stop. You know what I mean? An ego trip doesn't stop until something brings it down. And so
Yeah.
is it ego? Is that the whole thing? Is it control? Is it controlling the population and kind of, is that, because that's kind of part of the ego trip, but also
Mm-hmm.
there's another aspect to that, the control, whereas you can influence the future direction of society, of humanity,
Yeah.
which have now become Tlonians. So
Right. And the people
what
who
do you think?
created that, who are part of the founding, fathers of this planet, I guess, they know the truth, I guess, which is that Tlon, it was just this invention, but a lot of people will just take, elements from this world and see it as their complete reality.
Right.
But then again, if everybody starts believing that, then that becomes the reality. So it's just really confusing. And does it really matter that there are a handful of people in the world who know that Tlon is just this invention?
Well, and doesn't that harken back to the whole thing that the subjective creates the outer reality?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's crazy what Borges does with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
And sorry.
go ahead. No, please.
Oh, I was gonna say, how the third part opens, or after the story. So we get the I guess first part of the story, which are parts 1 and 2, which ends and it says that Borges wrote that in 1940, right? And then he says, okay, I'm writing this in 1947, saying this is the article exactly as it appears in this book, in this anthology of fantastical literature and all of that. And then it's the exact same, other than, these few edits that I made. So it's almost him saying, like, I wrote this text and went back and edited some things and then put it out in the world with these changes. So again, the idea of everything is constantly changing and evolving.
Right.
But at the same time, it's Borges in the story. So it's not really clear who's talking there,
Right.
And I don't know if that makes sense. And then in that last paragraph, I guess I want to raise the question of, do you think that Borges's mentality changed after finding out about Tlon and all of that, because of the last sentence in which he just says the world will become Tlon, but I'm, just gonna focus in this translation that I'm working on, which I'm not gonna put out to print. So I guess I took that as he's working on a translation, which is, translations are imperfect. There's no way that you could possibly translate a text and for it to be the same text. You're changing the language, and just in that you're already changing the text, even if it's a literal translation. But he says, I don't want it to be printed, and printing feels very much like a mirror or like fatherhood, in that it's just almost repeating the solution. So I don't know if there's a lot to be said about just like that last sentence. What do you think?
Yeah, totally. I think that connection is exactly right. It's like a withdrawal into self,
right?
And not fighting, not resisting. That because all of reality for our narrator ultimately is like that mirror, reflecting men, reflecting things. It's all an illusion anyway.
The collective. He's powerless to change the collective, the direction that the collective is going. Yet he's seen each step along the way. So we got a very we're privileged individual in this to see the progression of this big plan. So I kind of am about to go off the rails on this, I think, because when it comes down to it, I see an analog for this story with what is actually in our reality, and I don't think that Borges is not familiar with it. I mean, he's definitely familiar with this, and with the references that we've touched on a couple of times about the secret societies, especially him bringing up the Rosicrucian order and Hermeticists, that he knows exactly what I'm about to get into right here, even though it might seem, fasten your seatbelts.
Yeah, I got confidence.
All right. So in 1660, the year 1660, there is a society called the Royal Society that was established in London. And what they did is they established scientific materialism. They established they were made to promote science and the benefits of science. That's what they did. The Royal Society promoted that there is a benefit to a scientific worldview. That means the scientific hypothesis. That means observation, experimentation, and measurement are tools for figuring out the world. This society was started by Hermeticists. Hermeticists have a cosmology, have had a cosmology for 2,000 years before 1660. They have a cosmology. They have a complete belief set of philosophy. It is a philosophy. Hermeticism is a philosophy. And one of the tenets of Hermeticism is that the world is of mental construction. The universe is mental. There is a design, for lack of better word. There is an intelligence that is in back of the universe. They don't call it God. They call it the all, because it is the universe itself. But there is a conception that the universe is of mental construction. Everything comes from the mental first off, and then it proceeds to a physical fruit. The seed is mental. The fruit is physical. So it begs the question, why would a society, why would a group who already has a construction, an understanding of the universe and reality as it is, establish a society that is actually apart from and different from what it believes itself. The Hermeticists, who have a very spiritual, or for lack of a better word, mental based worldview of what this reality is, established a society called the Royal Society that actually only takes observation, measurement, and your senses, what you can see outside of yourself, external stuff, as the only basis for how you can gather information. They already had their kind of thing, and the motivations of this group have been the subject of conspiracy theory and stuff like that for ever since its inception. The question is, why did they do it? Did they do it for control? Because what are they doing? They're basically putting out there a worldview, which we all three can agree, I'm sure, that has now taken over the lion's share of human beings on the face of this planet. Scientific materialism, or science, just science, the scientific method.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Well, let's say again, I don't know about this secret society, but
I'm not saying it's a secret society.
Right,
the Royal Society is not a secret society. They are the ones that established the scientific method as the way that sciences are going to move forward in London in 1660.
But do you think science would have progressed if they didn't adopt that method?
No, I mean they started the scientific method as a part.
Why can't you work in the science track and then work in the spiritual track?
Sure. They definitely do. What I'm saying is that what they did is put out there like a university, a very prestigious. I mean, they are these kind of high level, the kind of secret society that Borges is talking about in this story, that they are doing things for reasons unknown, and they are doing things behind the scenes, and they have the means. As Ezra Buckley gave all of his whole inheritance money, everything, to the cause of Tlon. So these kind of things, these individuals are politicians, high level academics, of the highest order. From the start of this thing, they are Hermeticists. They are parts of the Rosicrucians, of the Freemasons. That's the orders that started the Royal Academy. And what they did is establish that scientific method is the way that society is going to move forward to figure out things. What I'm saying is that they already had answers for that. Personally, they had answers for that. What they're doing is giving a method and a whole thing out there for society to figure out and work within a framework. They had limited society in order to do that. And I think that Borges is working that out in a way. What they believe is that mind is the creator, that the mind itself is the creator of our world. That's Hermetics, right? But their framework that they're putting out there just leaves these kind of things out: subjectivity, mental value placed on experiences. It leaves all that kind of stuff out. The only way to really control human beings is to make them believe that there's something that they're not. All right. We are very powerful and expansive beings. We can do a lot of things just by our imaginations and our believing that we can do something. That enables us to go for something that we don't have right now. If we can imagine that we can have it, then we can put more effort into it. Imagination, feeling, and these kind of things have a lot of value for our kind of growth. But in a scientific worldview, those kind of things are not placed any value on. So I'm just saying that I see an analog between that kind of thing happening, and that is a Hermetic order, that's a Rosicrucians, a Freemason, an order, that kind of thing of what they have done in our actual society, and what is done kind of in the inverse way in this story. So I told you I'm going off the rails, but I hope that I delivered in a real way, because what it comes down to is belief. We're either spiritual or material, right? Well, no, we are both. It's a spectrum, and we are all of that spectrum, spiritual and material. We are either our mind or our senses, right? No, we are a spectrum. We are both. There is a huge, rich internal life, and there is a incomprehensibly complex external life that we experience. And what it comes down to is a belief and an understanding of eternalism and nihilism. Neither of those are correct. This is a spectrum of belief, and we are navigating that through by our own belief all the time. And I love this kind of exploration, but I think that Borges really threw us out there this time, huh? What do you think?
This is why we love you, Noah. This is why we come to you.
Yeah, right?
This is why you're inimitable.
Right? Only you would read this and go, I know what's going on.
I think Borges, I mean, that's this kind of stuff that I'm talking about is, this is the kind of thing that he's talking about at the beginning, where, an academic that is doing nothing but reading and exploring literature and history and literature and all that kind of stuff, they love secret knowledge that's being held by a few and not being told and all that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is intriguing. And that's the kind of thing that feeds this kind of exploration. And so Borges was not, foreign to the kind of things I'm talking about. I'm sure of it. Whether he believed it, whether that's, here nor there, I don't know. But I'm saying that he's not foreign to it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I love you guys. You got anything else to add? We're at 127.
Did we set the record? No, we didn't set the record. I've seen longer streams, I think.
We haven't. We've set the record for the Borges exploration.
The Borges record. Okay, that's good.
Oh, definitely. Definitely have.
Anything else? Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
awesome.
Noah.
Thank you, Ami. You rock. And
great. Yeah, this is awesome.
Thank you, Borges.
Yeah.
Right.